Yo, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we have 5 unsettling Reddit stories. You guys have been crushing it with the support, so let's get to 1,000 subs. Let's say by the end of December, guys. I know we can do it, so yeah, make sure to drop some support, leave some comments, leave a like, and let me know what you guys want to see next. Let's get right into it. I was in Taiwan one year when I was younger, traveling to one of those bustling night markets. If you've ever been to Taiwan, you know how these night markets are an essential part of the culture. They're busy, vibrant, and full of life. Stalls selling street food, vendors hawking clothes and trinkets, and just crowds of people enjoying the evening at these markets. It was late, probably around 9 or 10 p.m., and the market was absolutely packed. After wandering around for a while, I started feeling the need for a break. I spotted a sign for a net cafe down a small side street, and I figured I'd stop by to check my emails and maybe just take a few minutes to relax. Net cafes were pretty common back then, and they were always a convenient place to get online when you didn't have access to Wi-Fi or a phone with data. I needed to send some emails to some friends back home, so it seemed like the perfect place to stop. The sign directed me to an older building, maybe 5 or 6 stories tall. Nothing fancy, kind of worn down, but not out of place in that part of town. A lot of buildings in Taiwan have that seen better days look, especially outside the major cities. The entrance to the building was pretty easy to miss. It was a narrow hallway, dark and a little dingy, leading to a small elevator. I wasn't really paying much attention at the time. I just wanted to get inside, cool off, and find the net cafe. The building was old, which is not unusual in Taiwan. The elevator though was surprisingly modern. It was well lit and it looked like it had been recently renovated. I figured the building must have done some work, or maybe just the elevator had been upgraded. I stepped in and I pressed the button for the 6th floor where the net cafe was located. Now in some of these Chinese buildings they don't include a 4th floor. It's considered bad luck because the word for 4 sounds like the word for death. So the elevator panel just read 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I just hit the button for the 6th floor and waited. The elevator started moving slowly and quietly. Everything seemed normal until it stopped. The door slid open and I almost stepped out thinking I'd reached the net cafe. But something was off immediately. I noticed how dark it was. Pitch black except for the light of the elevator. The air felt thick, like the place hadn't been touched in years. I could make out the faint outlines of furniture, random chairs and tables, all covered with white cloths like what you've seen in an abandoned house. I froze for a second. It was eerie. The whole floor looked like it had been completely deserted, like it had been forgotten for decades now. I thought I had gotten out on the wrong floor, so I glanced at the elevator panel. Strangely, none of the floor indicators were lit. The buttons were all dark, but the one I pressed for the 6th floor was still illuminated. I was really confused, so I kinda hesitated to do everything. Everything happened so quickly, just a few seconds really, but it was enough to send chills down my spine. That's when I saw it. In the far corner of the floor, barely visible in the darkness, something moved. At first I wasn't sure what I was looking at, but as my eyes adjusted, I could make out the shape of a figure. It looked like a person dressed in some kind of loose, flowing gown. They were moving slowly and they were almost drifting towards the elevator. I absolutely panicked. My hand shot out and I hit the close door button repeatedly. The door started to close, but just before they shut completely, the lights in the elevator started to flicker. For a split second, I was standing there in complete darkness and the figure was still in the distance. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breathing quick and really shallow now. Just as quickly as the lights had flickered back on and the doors closed, the elevator jolted back to life and continued moving up. When the doors opened again, it was the 6th floor, the net cafe, bustling with people, brightly lit, totally normal. I stepped out, still pretty shaken. I could barely believe what I had just seen. My mind was racing, trying to rationalize it, but none of it made sense. I sat down at one of the computers and tried to calm myself down. After a few minutes, I decided to go to the front desk and casually asked the girl working there if she had seen anything weird about the building. I told her about what I'd seen, trying to play it off like it wasn't a big deal, but as I described the dark floor and figure, her expression changed. She went pale. She leaned in a little closer and said that she'd never experienced anything like that herself, but some of her coworkers had. Apparently the building has had a lot of bad reputation around it. She said the 4th floor was closed because it used to be a hair salon, but the place shut down years ago after one of the employees committed suicide there. The story goes that she had passed away, and after her death, customers started reporting strange things. They'd see flashes of red in the water when their hair was being washed, like it was mixing with blood. Others would see reflections of someone standing behind them in mirrors, even though no one was there. The salon eventually went out of business. The building owner tried to rent the space out a few times after that, but no one would take it. There were too many stories about accidents happening during the renovations, tools disappearing, mirrors shattering, and one worker even got his hand caught in the elevator doors. After that, they sealed off the floor and they had the elevator reprogrammed so it would never stop there. That's when it really hit me. The elevator wasn't supposed to be able to go to the 4th floor. It doesn't even have a button for it. But for some reason it took me there, and I saw something. I'm not a superstitious person, but that night I couldn't shake that feeling that I'd stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to see. I never went back to that building again. I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. For those unfamiliar, 29 Palms is a small desert city located in the barren high desert of East LA. The landscape out there is rugged and empty. You could drive for miles without seeing another person or car. There's something about that desolation that's both peaceful and unnerving at the same time. The shortcut I was taking was a 2-lane highway that cut through total nothingness. No gas stations, no rest stops, just vast stretches of desert and the occasional tumbleweed. The only notable place along this route is a nearly abandoned town called Amboy, California. It's one of those eerie places that feels like it belongs in an old western film. A town that time forgot. Amboy sits below sea level, kinda like Death Valley, and it's surrounded by strange features. A dormant volcano on one side, an ancient lava field, and a salt flat on the other. There are rumors at the time that Amboy had become a hotspot for weird occult or satanic activity, though I never gave much thought into it. To me, it was just another ghost town that had seen better days. It was a little after noon when I rolled into Amboy. The sun was beating down hard and there wasn't a soul in sight. I stopped for a minute, mainly to stretch my legs and take a picture of the Welcome to Amboy sign. My friends had dared me to take this route as they know it's creepy and isolated, so I figured I'd grab the shot as proof. I snapped the picture and got back into my car and continued driving. The road started to climb up this small mountain range, which was a relief because it meant cooler temperatures. The sun was hanging low now and it was casting these shadows across the desert. I remember thinking how strange it felt to be completely alone on this stretch of highway. No cars in front of me, none behind me, just me and the road. As I reached the top of the pass, I noticed something odd up ahead. The road curved slightly and there was someone lying in the middle of it. I slowed down to get a better look, and as I got closer I saw a red Pontiac Fiero stop sideways. It was blocking both lanes. Clothes and personal belongings were scattered across the asphalt like someone had thrown a suitcase open in panic. But what really made my heart stop were these two bodies lying face down in the road, a man and a woman. Their arms were sprawled out at unnatural angles and their faces turned away from me. I pulled over about 100 feet away and just stared. My first instinct was to help, but something felt wrong. The whole scene looked too perfect, too staged, like something out of a horror movie. Why would they both be lying down? And why were their belongings scattered like that? The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I'm a Marine and I've seen a lot of stuff in my day, but this felt different, like it was a trap. I reached under my seat and grabbed my 9mm pistol. I wasn't about to take any chances. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, watching my options. Every bone in my body was telling me to stay in the car, but I couldn't just drive away, could I? What if they were seriously hurt? What if this was some kind of accident? Then again, what if it was an ambush? I decided to trust my gut. There was just something about it and that just didn't sound right with me. I scanned the road ahead and I plotted a path that I could drive through without hitting them. I could pass the guy on the left and then swerve around the woman to the right, avoid the Fiero, and continue on my way. I took a deep breath, dropped into my car into first gear, and I punched the gas. My heart was racing as I steered through the narrow gaps between the bodies in the car. I held my breath as I passed the man, then the woman, my tires just inches away from their still forms. Once I was clear of this scene, I drove about 200 feet up ahead and slowed down. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel and they started to hurt. I glanced up into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the body still laying there and the people asking for help. But what I saw instead will haunt me forever. The two bodies were no longer laying down. They were both on their knees, and at least 20 people had emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road. They were standing there watching me. Some of them were holding what looked like knives or sticks, and they were slowly walking towards the Pontiac Fiero. My heart exploded in my chest. I slammed my foot on the gas, and I didn't let up until I hit the I-40 on-ramp miles away. I didn't stop to look back. I didn't even stop to breathe. I just drove as fast as my car would take me. I never know what would have happened if I had gone out of my car, or even if I'd stopped any closer to those bodies. Maybe they were just messing with me. Maybe they weren't. But somehow, I doubt the outcome would have been good. Real life can be scarier than any movie, and this was one of those moments that reminded me how fragile our lives can be. The picture I took of the Amboy sign is still on my phone to this day. It's a little souvenir from the road trip I'll never forget. I have an odd habit that a friend recently picked up on, a habit that I developed about a year ago. He noticed that when I enter a room, any room, and shut the door, I turn my face away from it and close my eyes until I hear the lock click. Only after the door is fully closed will I open them. He gave me a hard time about it until I told him where it started. I work for a water seal company in St. Paul. We produce sealant for exposed wood decks, boats, and that kind of thing. I checked into this dismal hotel, the Hotel Umbra, that looked like the decor hadn't been changed since the 1930s. The lobby wallpaper had gone yellow from decades of cigarette smoke, and everything had a fine layer of dust, including the old man behind the front desk. I hoped that the room would be in better shape. Mine was on the 4th floor, and I was positioned here for work. Being an old place, the hotel had a rickety cable elevator, the kind with the double sets of doors, one of those flexing metal gates, and a solid outer pair of doors. I shut the gate and latched it, and I pressed the tiny black button for my floor. Just as the outer elevator doors were about to close, I was startled by the face of a young woman rushing at the gap between them. She was too late. The door shut, and after a moment the elevator began to ascend. I thought nothing of it until I needed to take the elevator back down for one of my bags. I entered, pushed the button for the lobby, and pressed my tired back to the elevator wall opposite of the doors. They had nearly completely shut when, again, I was surprised by a woman's face moving towards the gap, staring into the elevator through the gate, too late to place her hand and stop the doors from closing. This time I sprang forward and I held the door open button, and after a moment the doors lurched and slid open. I waited a moment. From the opening I could see partly down the hallway. No one in sight. I was still holding the button down, and I slid open the metal gate and crammed my head into the hallway to look down the other direction. No one. No trace of the girl. No recently shut hotel room. No footsteps. No jingle of keys. Absolutely nothing. I released the button, but I didn't lean against the wall again. I stood directly in front of where the gap in the doors would be, right in the center of the elevator. After a pause, the outer doors again began to slide shut, to move towards each other until the space between them was the width of a young girl's face. In that quarter second, several fingertips appeared, followed immediately by her face again, rushing from around the corner, staring at me as the doors met. I had been watching the gap where I thought she might be, so I saw her. She was about 13 years old, and very plain, almost homely, with a pale complexion and neck-length dark brown hair that looked mussed or slightly dirty. I didn't have time to glance down at her visible shoulder to see what she was wearing. From her behavior, I wondered if she was a runaway or a homeless person who had gotten into the building. She had a glassy, blank expression, tinged with a little desperation, some distant desire or need, a look that could be easily accompanied by the words, "Please help." The next time I passed the front desk, I asked the old man if he'd seen a young girl running through. "Heard the stories then," he said, between the throat clearings, rocking gently in his seat. "Young Maddie hasn't been here for a long time. Takes a liking to gentlemen guests. Always been shy, never says a word. Not a word, just curious." I told him I haven't heard any stories, and that there had been a girl taking the stairs and standing in front of my elevator on every floor. "That's our Maddie," he said. "She likes you then, sweet on you. She just wants to see you, that's all." just to see. All she ever does. Curious little thing, just wants to see. I stayed at the Hotel Umbra for 3 nights. It was a 4-night business trip. The last night I tried sleeping in my car and it didn't help. Let me tell you about young Maddie. You only catch glimpses of her, of a face with the resigned look of quite desperation, dominated by a pair of wide dark eyes. Locked doors, barricades, nothing made a difference. She gets inside, always. I never saw her longer than half a second. Every time I laid eyes on her, she retreated instantly, only to appear again an hour or 2 later. An hour or 2 if I was lucky. Let me tell you about where I saw her. Every time I shut doors to my bathroom and my hotel room, I saw her. If I watched as I shut it at the last possible second, I'd see the crescent of her face moving fast at the gap. I'd throw the door open to find nothing. Every time I closed the closet door, I saw her. If I watched that gap, she'd suddenly be inside the closet, leaning her head to watch me as it shut. It's as if she knew where to go, where to be, so that my eyes would always meet with hers. But there was never an impact, never a moment where she would make contact with the door or wall. The first time I sat at that writing table, I saw her. As I closed the large bottom drawer, she rushed at the gap from inside the drawer, her eyes wide open, pleading for something that I could not give. I pulled the drawer from its rails and I threw it to the floor. I did spend that last night in my car, but like I said, it did no good, tossing and turning on that rental car seat. I'd have to open my eyes sometimes, and if there was a place for her to dart up from my view when I opened them, she did. In the side view mirror, or peeking over the hood of my car, once upside down, at the top of the windshield, as if she was on the roof. I'm back in St. Paul again, and I've been back for a year, but she hasn't stopped. If I keep my eyes open long enough, I'll eventually see her, sometimes in my workplace, sometimes in the parking garage, usually wherever she wants to be. There's never anything there when I go to look, so I've stopped looking. That's how I've had to change things since the Hotel Umbra. I've stopped looking. I keep my eyes shut when I close doors, when I shut drawers and cabinets, fridges, coolers, the trunk of my car. Not all spaces, just ones that are big enough. At least that used to work. I was getting ready for bed a few nights ago, standing in front of my bathroom mirror, doors shut, cabinets shut, watching myself floss. I opened up wide to get my molars. I swear I saw fingertips retreat down the back of my throat. Alright, so I'm not one to post much, but this has been eating at me, and I don't really have anyone to talk about it to. I figured I'd post on here and see if anyone has had something similar happen, or if it's just my mind playing tricks on me. This all started a couple weeks ago. I'm an avid camper and hiker, and I usually take solo trips into the most remote part of the woods. It's always been my escape. No people, no noise, just me and nature. I know some people think it's dangerous to go alone, but I've been doing this for years without any problems until recently. I'd taken a few days off work and decided to go on a camping trip out to a national forest that I hadn't explored much before. It was a pretty secluded area, not a popular spot by any means, which is exactly why I chose it. The first 2 days were perfect. Great weather, not a soul in sight, just me, the trees, and my tent. On the 3rd day, I decided to go on a longer hike, something really to test my endurance. I packed a day bag with water, snacks, and my knife, and headed out to a trail that looked like it hadn't been used in a long time. It wasn't marked, but I figured it was probably an old ranger trail or something. The forest was dense, but I felt good, and it was also pretty peaceful. About 5 or 6 miles in, I came across something weird. In the middle of the trail, there was this one structure, or what was left of one. It looked like a cabin, or at least the remains of one. The wood was old and rotting, the roof caved in, and there was moss growing all over it. I've come across old abandoned cabins before, so this wasn't too unusual for me. What was strange was, it didn't look like it had been there or lived there for decades, but there were fresh footprints leading inside. At first I thought that maybe some other hiker had stumbled upon it before me. These were the only footprints that were around. No other trail of footprints leading away, just going in. I stood there for a while, debating whether or not I should check it out. I'm not easily spooked, but something about the whole scene was making me pretty uneasy. Still, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to go take a quick look inside. The cabin wasn't much, just a single room with a dirt floor and a few broken pieces of furniture scattered around. There was something in the corner that immediately caught my attention. It was a large pile of what looked like bones. Animal bones, I told myself. But some of them were way too big for that. The skull sitting on top of the pile definitely wasn't from any animal I've ever seen. I'm no expert, but it definitely looked human. My stomach dropped. The air in the cabin felt different now, like it was thicker, harder to breathe. I wanted to get out of there, but my feet felt glued to the ground. That's when I noticed something else, a small dirty notebook lying next to the pile of bones. I don't know why, but I decided to pick it up. It was soaked through, pages warped and stained, but I could still make out some of the writing. Most of it was illegible, like it had been written a long time ago, and the ink had now bled through. But there were a few words I could read, and what I did read made me pretty upset. I hear them at night. They're watching me. I can't leave. That was enough for me. I dropped the notebook practically and sprinted out of the cabin, and I didn't stop until I was a good mile away. I don't know what I was expecting, but I knew I needed to get the hell out of there. Here's where it gets worse. That night back at my campsite, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was like the entire forest had gone silent, and there was nothing around anymore. All the lifeless activity kind of made me think that something was up, or that there was some kind of spirits lurking around me. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow footsteps that were just walking outside my tent. At first I thought it was maybe a deer or some other animal, but these footsteps were too heavy. It sounded like a person. I grabbed my knife and listened, hoping to hear them pass, but they never did. They stopped right outside my tent. I was paralyzed with fear. Whoever or whatever just stood there. I couldn't see anything through the tent fabric, and I could feel that someone was watching me. One of those feelings that you get when you know someone's behind you. Then I heard it, a whisper. It was really quiet, almost too quiet to make out, but I swear I heard someone whisper, "I can't leave." I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. I stayed completely still, holding my breath, waiting for something to happen. After what felt like forever, the footsteps started again, walking away from my tent and disappearing into the woods. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and as soon as the sun came up, I packed up my camp and hiked out of there as fast as I could. I don't know what I heard or what I saw, but I'm never going to go back to that spot again. Has anyone ever experienced anything like this? I feel like I'm going crazy. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but I swear there was something wrong about this place and the whole cabin situation. I genuinely don't know what to do at this point. I'm a pretty rational guy. I don't believe in ghosts or anything paranormal, but something's been happening to me and I'm starting to think I'm losing my mind over it. I need to get this out and maybe someone can tell me I'm not crazy. About a month ago, I started a new job as a night security guard for this storage facility in a small town. You know, the type with rows and rows of storage units, dimly lit by creepily overhead lights, basically in the middle of nowhere. The pay isn't great, but the hours work for me, and honestly, it's a pretty easy gig. All I have to do is sit in the office, monitor the cameras, and do a few rounds of the property to make sure everything's locked up. The first couple weeks were totally normal. The facility is pretty dead at night, and there's not much activity going on. Occasionally someone comes by to drop off or pick up some stuff, but mostly it's usually quiet. Then about a week ago, things began to get kinda weird. It was around 3 a.m. and I was doing my usual round, walking the perimeter of the storage units with my flashlight. Everything seemed fine, but as I turned the corner to check the furthest row of units, I noticed something strange. One of the units had its door slightly open. Not much, maybe just an inch or two, but definitely enough for me to notice. Now, my job is to make sure everything is secure, so I figured the person who rented it didn't close it properly. It happens usually, and they usually call us to see if it actually ended up locking. I walked up to the door and grabbed the handle and started to pull down when I heard breathing. I froze. It was coming from inside the unit. It wasn't loud, but it was definitely there. Heavy, labored breathing, like someone was trying to hide but couldn't control their breathing. I can't explain it, but in that moment, every instinct in my body just told me to leave it alone. I took a step back and I shined my flashlight inside the unit, but all I could see was the usual junk that people store. Boxes, old furniture, nothing out of the ordinary. The breathing had now stopped. I quickly shut the door, locked it, and I got the hell out of there. I convinced myself that it was just my imagination. Whatever it was just didn't sit right with me. The next night I was on edge, but things seemed normal again. No open doors, no weird noises. I started to think that I had just spooked myself the night before. That was until 3 nights ago. It was around the same time, 3 a.m., and I'm sitting in the office watching the camera feeds. We have a pretty decent coverage of the facility, but the cameras are all black and white and they're pretty low quality. As I'm watching, something catches my eye on the screen. The door to the same storage unit is open from the night before. Now here's the thing, the units are supposed to automatically lock when you close them. There's no way for them to just pop open. But this one was standing wide open, like someone had deliberately tried to open it. I switched between the different camera angles, trying to see if anyone was around, but there was no one. The facility was completely empty. I watched the screen for a while, half expecting someone to come out walking up the unit, but nothing happened. I grabbed my flashlight, took a deep breath, and I headed out to check what was going on. When I got to the unit, the door was still open. I shined my flashlight inside, and this time it was completely empty. I don't mean empty like no one was there, I mean everything was gone. The boxes, the furniture, everything that had been there the other night. I know what you're thinking, maybe the person who rented it cleared it out, but that doesn't make sense because the door had been locked and I didn't see anyone come or go on the cameras. And even if they did come to get their stuff, why would they leave the door wide open in the middle of the night? That's when I noticed something else. Inside the unit on the far wall were these scratch marks. Long, deep scratches like someone had been clawing at the wall and they were pretty fresh. I locked the door again and I went back to the office trying to rationalize it, but my gut was telling me something wasn't right. I reviewed the camera footage for the rest of the night, but there was nothing. No one came in or out, no signs of movement, the unit just opened by itself. Last night was the worst. I was sitting in my office trying not to think about the open unit when the motion sensor alarm went off. We have these sensors in a few of the units that are more high security. When one of them gets triggered, it sets off an alarm in my office, and the alarm was for the same unit. I looked at the camera feed and sure enough the door was open again. I don't know why, but I felt sick to my stomach. I grabbed the keys and the flashlight and headed out there trying to calm myself down. When I got to the unit, the door was wide open, but this time the air inside was different. It was cold like a freezer and there was this faint smell like copper or metal. I took a step inside and that's when I heard it again, this deep breathing. But this time it wasn't coming from the back of the unit, it was right behind me. I turned around so fast that I dropped my flashlight and there was no one there, just the empty hallway of storage units stretching out in both directions. I slammed the door shut and I ran back to the office. I checked the camera feeds but they showed nothing once again. Just me standing there like an idiot jumping at shadows. I don't know what's going on, but I'm seriously thinking about quitting. I've got one more shift tonight and if anything else happens, I'm done. Has anyone else ever experienced something like this? I'm really not sure what the hell is going on. That is going to be the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed these stories. I had a fun time making these, and let me know what you guys want to see next. I appreciate all the support. You guys have really been killing it. Make sure to like and subscribe for more videos and turn on those notifications because I'm be cranking out content in the next few months for you guys. So let's get it. Let's hit that goal. See you guys.